I did a minor in philosophy of religion, so I can argue against religion better. So if you want to, I was like the extreme fedora atheist.
Time didn't exist before the Big Bang. That could be possible, right?
I mean, you could imagine that something material just randomly occurred from nothingness, but that actually doesn't make any logical sense.
Yeah, but
so
neither God doesn't. God literally defies logic by being immaterial.
Yes,
the immaterialness of him. Yeah, so you can't claim that we need logic.
It actually makes sense.
Well, it doesn't at all, but okay.
But philosophically, God does.
Sure. From the atheist perspective, though, this is literally just a God of the gaps argument. I can't describe to you the perfect conditions literally at the beginning of the universe. Therefore, you're going to make grand sweeping claims about the physical realities of every single thing that exists just because you can't ascertain with 100% certainty how the universe started.
Blah, blah, blah. You could say that all happened by accident, but what
No, wait.
Yeah, just continuing to enjoy your abortion debates, and I was listening to your previous one. I'm not done that one yet, but it just got me thinking, like, how come people change their minds so drastically on things? Like, I know you used to be religious and pro-life. Correct me if I'm wrong, obviously.
Troll-like?
Pardon?
Did you say troll-like?
Pro-life and religious.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
I actually used to be an atheist and very pro-choice, and I made a 180 change, and you made, I wouldn't call your change 180, but mostly. So what do you think happens in people's lives that that huge change occurs? Like, do you have any insight generally, or can you only speak from a personal perspective?
I think huge change probably comes from a couple of different things. I would say for me, and what's probably true for a lot of people, is there's probably a huge change that comes in your mid to late teenage years. But what that huge change is going to be driven by is that when you're born, you are basically I'm saying indoctrinated. That's a really loaded word. You absorb all of the stuff around you, right? Like, the biggest predictor of you being a Muslim is being born into a Muslim family. The biggest predictor of you being probably a vegan or vegetarian is being born into a vegan or vegetarian family, right? My guess is that, like, you absorb a lot of things around you. That's not by choice, and it's not through any type of meta level self-reflection. That's just you absorb it because you're there. So once you start to become a teenager and you start to get exposed to more people on the internet, maybe you go away to college, that's probably the first time in your life that you're forced to critically reevaluate all of your thoughts and feelings. And that probably brings with it the first stage for really big change. Assuming there wasn't like an earlier exchange of like being adopted by somebody or, something like that. So for me, that was that big change. The second part is...
Okay, so that's personal. You would say that was your personal journey, and also generally that's what you see?
Yeah. Well, and then the second thing that I think would be big would be... Rid, thanks for tier 5 stepping. The second thing would probably be dramatic life events. So you like a near-death experience or something like that, or like hitting rock bottom and like some addiction problem like that, or having a child maybe, or losing a loved one. Like, those big events might cause like a radical shift of ideas.
Do you think it can be like really self-serving in both directions? Like, depending on where your lifestyle goes? Like, I would say it's improbable that someone who does a lot of hedonistic activities would become a born-again Christian unless they have some sort of near-death experience. And also maybe the other way around, if you have a personality that needs a strict following of routine or some sort of very narrow pathway and ideology, you can go either into like a dogmatic religious orientation, or you could like become very left-wing or even like very right-wing.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. It would just depend on, it just super depends. Like, people can change ideologies for what I would consider to be good reasons and for what I would consider to be bad reasons. It probably just depends on the person and and why they changed, yeah.
So can I ask you a personal question then?
Anything
about
you want, go for it.
Yeah, sure. Was there like a moment where you flipped, and was there a specific thing that did it, or was it just kind of this progression that you just described?
You mean from being like Catholic to atheist?
Sure. I mean, there's a joke, right? The best atheists are ex-Catholics.
Sure, maybe, yeah. So. And the best Catholics are probably the best ex-atheists, right? Because they're probably the ones that do all the research and everything on the catechism and the Bible and everything.
Sure. Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I think it was just I'll speak candidly, but this is gonna be a bit insulting, but I would say that like if you're born religious and you have a sufficiently critical mind, then I would imagine that your religiosity or your theology will never survive like an inquisitive teenage year. That would be my thing. That's essentially what it was for me. That like you get older, you start asking questions, you become more exposed to like scientific thought processes. Like, wow, I believe in a God, but I can't test for him. I've never seen him. I've got no proof of his existence. He supposedly is the causal impetus for all these things, but there's absolutely no evidence of that. The entire world, right? Like that type of like thought process over and over and over again, I think makes it really hard to hold on to those religious beliefs. And the onus is going to be on a religious institution to kind of like lock down, like, I know that you've got this question, but it's because of this, or to kind of counter all of that like in a very active way. That'd be like my guess. But obviously that's given from an atheist perspective, right? Yeah.
Sure. This is funny because I kind of had the complete opposite happen to me. Like, I was raised in an atheistic family. My dad, my dad's from the Soviet Union. He literally had atheism class when he was growing up.
Sure.
And he didn't change that view really. And I was an atheist up until my mid-20s. And a very hardened one. I actually did a minor in philosophy of religion, so I could argue against religion better. So if you want to, I was like the extreme fedora atheist of the time. And then in my mid-20s, I did a total flip, and I think actually what did it was I changed my mind on abortion. And then I said to myself, if I could be so wrong about such a big issue, maybe I'm wrong about something else.
Do you mind me?
That was subconscious, though.
Do you mind me asking how old you are?
I am 33. I'm your age.
You're a child. I'm 34. Okay, nice try. Okay,
yeah,
slow down there.
34 in a few months.
Yeah, and I'll be 35 a few months after that. So slow down there, okay, youngin.
I remember the golden years of the atheist YouTubers.
Yeah, Jesus, oof, the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Okay.
Yeah. Oh goodness.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just kind of, and you know what else it did for me? I was very involved in the libertarian anarcho-capitalist community. And I saw so much. Okay, so that community specifically is very atheistic, at least back then it was. And they drew their morality from first principles, or so they said. And the more I spent time with these people, I noticed that the first principles would warp and change relative to the people's needs and wants and, I guess, biases, right? So the morality that they claimed to be objective through first principles was always very easy to bend to their will. And then I saw very immoral acts happening all throughout the community, not just with like the lower down people, but especially coming from the top of the people that most people looked up to. And
wait, who is this? Is this in reference to like the atheists?
This is libertarian and anarcho-capitalist communities.
Okay, gotcha.
The talking heads on YouTube, etc. People organizing events and like doing.
Yeah, when I was 17, 18, I had my Ayn Rand period. So yeah.
Sure, and that was one of our pillars. And I just saw, like, I would go to these conferences and I would see like sexual assaults and thefts from literal charity organizations that they were claiming to support, thefts from each other, and just there wasn't any righteousness. Everyone claimed to be righteous and better than, both the normies and then the religious idiots, blah, blah, blah. We don't need a higher power. We have our own morality. Our morality is based on first principles. And then actually there was nothing. So then logically, I just came to the conclusion that you need a moral giver who is an objective source of your morality, not based on some sort of human. So that was
why could it not have been an answer that there just is no objective source?
So that is the whole issue I have with society, because
wait, your mic just cut out.
Based on their subjective will, right?
Wait, I'm sorry. You said that's the whole issue I have with society, and then your mic cut out.
Sorry. So secular society, I think in general, has this issue. And the reason it's not worse is because most societies today still have a lot of religious root in their legal systems. So we still, I mean, I think like religion is water to some extent. We don't appreciate what religion did for society because we still have a lot of our initial laws and assumptions from those texts. I have a 1-year-old running around with me. Pardon him.
You're good.
Can't help it. Um, so I think it's really easy for people to dismiss an objective moral lawgiver, such as a Christian God, especially in the West, when I would say that our laws, though changing today, most of our most important laws and the way we conduct ourselves socially still stem from those holy texts and the original interpretations
that it might be
of
the
those
case.
texts.
Yeah, it might be the case that the initial holy texts had good like guidance for us to live successful lives, but none of that gets us any closer to saying that like a God might be real, right? It could just be that those texts happen to stumble upon some secular truths that it's good not to murder, steal.
Sure. There's other good arguments for the existence of God, just based on a material thing can't create another material thing from nothing. Like there has to be something that's immaterial. It's the first mover argument. It's as old as time, right?
Yeah,
but it hasn't really been.
Yeah, but the first mover.
Well,
yeah, the first mover argument doesn't work though because you could just demand a first mover for God. No,
because the definition of God includes the fact that He is forever.
Yeah, but couldn't the definition of universe
right?
be that the universe is forever as well?
Yeah, but then it's not just material.
Why can't a material thing be forever? Why couldn't time have started with the universe?
Because material things inherently have to have come from somewhere.
No,
just by observation, right?
Well, by observation, we can't observe the beginning of the universe, right? We could be wrong on that. It might be the case that the universe and time started with the Big Bang.
The Big Bang is a material thing, so where did it come from?
It might have that might be the beginning of time. There was no place for it to come from. Time didn't exist before the Big Bang. That could be possible, right?
I mean, you could imagine that something material just randomly occurred from nothingness, but that actually doesn't make any logical sense.
Yeah, but
so
God doesn't. God literally defies logic by being immaterial.
Yes,
the immaterialness of him. Yeah, so you can't claim that we need logic.
It actually makes sense.
Well, it doesn't at all, but okay.
But then if you're arguing that, then you're just describing something. You're describing something that isn't understood from a scientific or a material perspective, or a measurable perspective, and you're saying, oh, we just don't know. But you need to kind of create a whole different set of rules for that. Like if you're going to say the world was created from a material thing that just came into existence by itself, and it is material, that doesn't fit the definition of what a material thing is.
Yeah, and I understand this.
So
this
at
is
least
like
philosophically, God does.
Sure. From the atheist perspective, though, this is literally just a God of the gaps argument. I can't describe to you the perfect conditions literally at the beginning of the universe. Therefore, you're going to make grand sweeping claims about the physical realities of every single thing that exists just because you can't ascertain with 100% certainty how the universe started. That's a wholly unconvincing argument. That's like the worst argument I've ever heard ever to believe in God.
The framing? It's not the main argument for me personally, but you can also frame an atheist's belief in the same way that you just framed what a religious person believes, right? You could say, well, to assume that the universe came from a material thing and we just don't understand anything, you're just making all these assumptions, it's a grand thing, we came out of the water, and the first organisms had an intuitive want to exist and perpetuate and to eat and to reproduce, which isn't actually explained by adaptation or evolution, because how can the first organisms already have these innate wants and needs and
wait, but these
instincts?
Innate things fit literally every single thing ever. What do you mean?
If so adaptation / evolution says that organisms do things that they have to adapt qualities for survival, but the innate wanting to survive and to reproduce is an adaptation.
Yeah, but it could literally all be driven by chemical reactions. As humans, we see patterns where we want there to see, so we might separate organic from inorganic life, but we could make the same argument theoretically that planets adapted from stardust as our galaxy formed, and then from stardust as our solar system formed. Yeah.
You could say that the material world came into existence materially in a way we can't explain, sure. And then you could say, all of the physical laws of the world and the way that biological things work towards their own survival from the very beginning without adapting, blah blah blah. You could say that all happened by accident, but what
no, wait. Clearly, hold on. That is the worst summary. I don't believe you're a strong atheist. Nothing is by accident. Just because natural selection isn't a divinely guided process doesn't mean that it was by accident. There might be random mutations, but the selection of things that happen to pass on to the next generation are absolutely not by accident.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about down the road. No, I'm not talking about down the road.
At any point, but nothing is an accident. Nothing is by accident.
But how can a material thing be purposefully created all of a sudden?
Why does something have to be created with purpose to exist?
The universe.
Okay,
the universe is created.
I can't.
Is it an accident?
I can't define the beginning of the universe. But again, now you're at God of the Gaps again. If you only want to have God because that's the beginning of the universe, then sure, you can say God made the beginning of the universe. But every single other process that you have defined, we can explain perfectly without God. You have a child in front of you. This child was created without any divine intervention.
Sure. I'm talking about when the world was created and you have the earth and you have the laws of the universe working very well together, even though they're very complex physical laws, right? And you have if you believe in a materialist worldview, you have these primordial, very simple biological animals, entities, microorganisms, right? And they already have the innate will to live, to procreate, and to go forward.
No, they didn't.
And yeah, they did.
Amino acids didn't have the will to procreate. Some are just better adapted to the environment than others. And then as you build more and more complex chains of amino acids and you start making proteins, you get more complex life, then eventually like that quote unquote will to live, I guess we call it that, but it's all just chemical reactions that are driving. Like, does an amoeba have a will to live because it might move towards something that it can consume versus not? Would you describe an amoeba as having a will? Or a single cell organism is having a will?
You can call it, you can say instinct, you can say program, but the matter of the fact is these things originated. Oh, we have a bonked head. These things originated and then continued to survive because there was a biological drive, I think is the best phrase. A biological drive for the organism to continue. And it's very difficult for biologists to explain.
It's not, well, to be clear, what you just said is totally not true. It's not difficult to explain any of that. That's like those are the easy questions to explain, I think.
Well, no, it's not, because if you create a new organism in a petri dish, what does it have the biological need to exist and continue going? So that is actually a question that biologists do struggle with. Do you know who Anthony Flew is?
I don't, but I know for a fact that biologists do not struggle with that question. I've never heard this ever in my entire life, and I'm willing to bet if we brought on biologists to talk about this, master's levels or higher, they're not going to say we struggle to, like, organisms don't have a will or an intent. There are just things they do. They might have proteins that interact with things in the environment that just happen to plug into certain nutrients. They might have mechanisms inside their their cellular bodies that move them in the direction of sunlight, but none of that is like a struggle to explain. They just have mechanisms that work and operate. We wouldn't say they have a will to live or anything. They just do their thing. And the things that are better suited to procuring resources and dividing are going to be the things that happen to survive more. And then that just builds up all the way to, I guess what we have today, humans, right?
Well, okay. I mean, even framed like that, that's quite the pill to swallow. I mean, even that is very difficult to
How?
Wrap your head around, because it seems like an oversimplified explanation of how things have come to be.
Well, of course it's oversimplified. I'm a video game streamer. Yeah, I can't break down the whole. I can't tell you. I mean, we can go and read and research it, but it's oversimplified, of course.
Sure, I'm not expecting. Yeah, but there are a lot of biologists that do rack their head, and chemists. They rack their heads about how these things actually functioned and had this kind of innate want to exist and continue on without adaptation to begin with. I've read this stuff, and I also can't 100% explain the nuanced difficulties that chemists and biologists have with the specific
Well, for this
argument, but
I know
there are people who question it quite a bit.
This isn't. I've never heard this argument before. I'm 100% positive that there's a YouTube video where a preacher, there's somebody that you heard give a sermon on this particular argument, because I've never heard it before my entire life. I don't think it's like a seriously considered scientific argument, so I'm positive that there's some preacher or somebody that you heard give this particular argument.
No. I don't listen to preachers. I'm Russian Orthodox.
Oh, okay. I've never heard this. You don't need intentionality to explain why amino acids, happen to survive or branch out and combine with other things. Like, none of that needs will to survive.
Well, I've read otherwise, but that's okay. I mean, we can both go back to our notes on our free time if we care to. Okay. But if you do want to read a book that it is coming to mind of what I'm drawing from, Anthony Flew was one of the biggest atheists in the 60s.
Okay. Wait, your microphone is cutting out again.
And he changed his mind, and it was there is no God in like 60s or 70s, and then he did a book, There Is a God, when he like 20 years later, and he's a very interesting man. He's someone who changed his opinion like very late in life, and it's just fascinating to me. And when I was an atheist, atheists tend to kind of dismiss, oh, he just got old, but I think that's like really patronizing. He was still sound of mind. But if you're ever interested, you could even read both books, There Is a God and then There Is No God, because it's someone who knows both arguments very well.
Sure, okay, to be clear, I looked this guy up really quickly, okay? And you can argue that he became religious, but he believes in an Aristotelian God, meaning he believes that there was a God that like basically started the universe and then walked away. If there was ever, like, I could theoretically be bought into, but I could, hold on, but that doesn't, everything that natural selection, all of that still happens without a divine maker, right? He just started the universe, but everything else that happened is still a natural process. But like, I could believe in a God like that, because that God does nothing. That's just the beginner of the universe, and then you walk away, right?
Sure, but he did change his mind from a materialist worldview, because there were materialist issues that rose with the explanation of how the universe came to be and how humans came to be. And that is what the book focuses on, which I thought was very interesting. That was kind of like, I was already going towards that direction, and then he kind of changed my mind on some things too. So if anyone's interested. But yeah, so that's interesting. So you didn't have like a big life event. You just kind of drifted away from that worldview and then adapted to kind of materialist.
Yeah, basically. Oh, and then I see why people accused it of mind stuff. He changed his position in 2004 when he was 81 years old. Not to say that it was necessarily because of senility or whatever, but I understand why people make that argument.
It's kind of like a cop. Like, he was sound of mind. Who cares if he's 80? Loads of people are sound of mind till they're 100. Some people deteriorate at 50. So it's not really a good argument. Even though I remember my philosophy professor dismissing him too on that basis, but when I looked into it, he wasn't like.
Well, it looks like, I mean, he changed his mind in 2000. He changed his mind in 2004, and it looks like in 2010 he died in a nursing home suffering from dementia. So that's 6 years later, but.
I mean, it depends when it came on. People with dementia don't generally write books. Even early onset dementia, I've been around several people that way, and they cannot write a book. So. I mean,
hold on. An early onset.
I'm biased now.
Well, I'm going to be biased. An early onset dementia person could absolutely write a book, of course.
But then, if they can write a book, then why would you dismiss their change of heart?
I wouldn't say I would dismiss it. I haven't read his arguments, but I'm just saying I can see why people are skeptical. If he changed his whole position at 81 and then died at like 87 with dementia, I can see why people are skeptical. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, that's fair enough, but that doesn't make his arguments less sound, right? It just makes people question maybe why he changed his mind.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah. But I thought his arguments were very interesting.
Okay. Anything else?
Could you see yourself ever changing your mind in the future? You probably have said you would if there was strong evidence.
Yeah, like, I'm never going to take anything. Abortion. Yeah, I would never take anything off the table completely. That would be foolish. It just depends on, I guess, what I encounter in the future, yeah.
Okay, well, nice talk.
Okay, well, have fun, be careful, stay safe. See you next time, bucko.